This is Dave with MTB Discount. We're starting our second part of the Bronson carbon build. You saw the headset install on the last series. Now we're going into the fork install, and we're going to actually bring in our Fox 34. It's a 27.5-inch wheel, 34 millimeter stanchions, 160 millimeter travel. And this is the float, so no height travel adjustment. We have actually put a bumper in here to lower it down to 150 millimeter travel to work well with the rear shock. We're going to be using our crown race setting tool from Park, the CRS 15, along with one of the included adapters. We're going to be using, of course, a hammer, and in this case a rubber mallet, and we're going to be using a torque wrench with a 6 millimeter Allen head, or hex head. And we're going to be installing the crown race on the fork with the CRS 15 crown race tool and the proper adapter. In this case, we're using the number 827 adapter that's included with it. You place the adapter on there on top of the crown race. You place the CRS 15 crown race system on there, and you give it a good couple of solid hits with the mallet until it seats. And you can hear that nice change in pitch on the hit, and you know that it's seated all the way around. And using the proper adapters will actually make sure that you don't damage the crown race. And in here you can see that it's seated all the way around, fitting properly. Now what we do is we take the lower bearing, drop that on top, go ahead and slide the fork through. And we took the liberty of cutting this down a little earlier. We actually measured it based on the spacers we're going to be putting in there, as well as the seal and the stem. And so we opted to run this thing with a 25 millimeter spacer on the bottom, followed by a 5 millimeter spacer up top. So I just inserted the upper bearing, the tapered washer, and now we're putting on the dust cap. And that basically all lines up. Everything is properly seated. You don't feel any play in that. We've already installed our star nut. Next step is going to be some of the RockShox carbon spacers. We're going to be using a 15 millimeter followed by a 5 millimeter. And this is a whole kit. That's the nice thing about this set. It gives you several options on setting up the height of your stem and bars. Next up is our gravity light stem. And we're just going to put this on finger tight for now so we can get everything lined up. And we've also got to install our bars as well so we can line everything up. So at this point now it'll hang on its own. You can take your hands off of it and actually grab some other parts. The upper spacers will go on next, and we measured it so it'll leave about 1/8 of an inch at the top to allow for our top cap. And again, at this point we're just going to put it on very lightly, but once we get it all lined up, we'll torque everything to spec. The stem gets torqued down to 6 Newton meters. Top cap will get torqued down to about 4. Again, you don't want it too tight because it'll actually compress and damage the bearings. And then finally we're going to put on our bars. For this we're using our Gravity Light downhill carbon risers, 31.8 millimeter clamp size, 25 millimeter rise, and 700 millimeters wide. Went with a little narrower bar because the person who's riding this likes a narrower bar. They're not that big. And we're going to insert our bolts on this now, and they are already pre-Loctited for us, so we don't have to worry about adding any thread locker or grease to them, which is something that you normally do if you don't have Loctite already on the bolts. You can Loctite them. I personally don't prefer Loctite. I prefer to actually just grease them and torque them to spec. They generally don't loosen up on you unless you're riding in a very rough area where they might vibrate loose. So at this point we'll get them down to where they're about finger tight, and again we're just going to go ahead and get them to where they are snug, holding the bars in place. So next up, once we've got these hand tight, we're actually going to use a torque wrench. We've got a couple options available for you, but Park makes an excellent one. But any torque wrench set to low torque would be perfect. This one we've got set to 6 Newton meters. And so you want to make sure, this is extremely important, and even more so with carbon bars, you go in a star pattern. So we'll start here, we're going to go up, tighten up the top one, go down to the bottom corner, and you want to kind of do them evenly so that you're not putting excess pressure on any one of the corners. And again, we're just kind of getting it snug down, and then you'll torque them down to where we get it to click. And again, 6 Newton meters is probably the maximum. On any of the carbon bars, you want to go with the lowest possible torque to keep it in place. And for this, we also added carbon fiber compounds. So anyway, you'll continue to torque until you hear the click. You're good. So now you're ready to start with your controls and the rest of the build. So we'll be moving on to the drivetrain next. We're going to start with the bottom bracket and cranks on our next series. Thanks.